Welcome to the Real World. My name is Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us on episode 78 of the Real World podcast. We're here to talk all about our favorite space movies. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Real World podcast. If you are new, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much. We're almost at 400 subscribers. This is huge. So if you guys shared this video with all of your friends, we will definitely hit 400 by the end of the week, which we are ecstatic about. On our way to 500 and then 1,000, hopefully by the end of the year. So we are really excited about everything going on here at the Real World. Today, we are talking about all of our favorite space films, reviewing the new movie I.S.S. But first, let's talk about some movie news. Chad Stahelski's next film is Highlander. He has confirmed that it is the next movie. He has been in development on it since 2016. Henry Cavill is set to star in the lead role. He will oversee both John Wick and Highlander as major franchises for Lionsgate across television and film. So this is very exciting news. I'm a huge fan of this director. Can't wait to see what he does next. Top Gun 3 is now in development. Tom Cruise, Miles Teller, and Glenn Powell will all return for the third film set in this franchise. Top Gun Maverick was a huge hit, so this is really no surprise at all. Anya Chalotra will play Cersei in the DCU series Creature Commandos, the animated series coming up soon on Max. She will also most likely reprise the role in live action because James Gunn has stated that all of these characters will cross over into animation and live action film. New cast members have been added to Minecraft, which is the live-action adaptation of the video game set for release in April of 2025. The cast includes Jason Momoa, Jack Black, Danielle Brooks, Jennifer Coolidge, Kate McKinnon, Jermaine Clement. This is quite a cast. Very excited to see what they do with this video game adaptation. Nick Frost has been cast as Gobber in How to Train Your Dragon, the live-action adaptation, and the film is now in production. The director, Dean Dubois, posted on social media that they have begun filming. Very excited to see what they do with this animation to live-action film. Netflix adds milestone movies section for certain films' 50th anniversaries, including The Great Gatsby, Blazing Saddles, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, The Parallax View, Chinatown, and The Conversation. All these classic films turning 50 this year. Very glad that Netflix is celebrating the history of film. Godzilla -1 minus color arrives in theaters this week. This is really exciting. Really curious to see what this film is going to be like in black and white. Spaceman trailer dropped this week. Adam Sandler stars as an astronaut. Very curious to see what they do with this sci-fi film. Looks very interesting, very different. That will be released soon, only on Netflix. All right, folks, well, that's it for movie news. Now it is time to jump into our main topic, which is space films. The new film I.S.S. was just released into theaters. Our reaction to that is on the channel right now, so you can check that out. We haven't done a review yet, so I'll do a brief review here in just a minute. But joining me on this episode, returning again, is Bert. How you doing, man?
Hello, Cam. I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks. Glad you could join us. I know this is a favorite topic of both of ours. We're big sci-fi guys, so this is going to be a fun discussion. Had to make some tough choices here, which we'll get into in a minute, creating this top 5 list. But before we do that, like I said, I just wanted to kind of break down the new film I.S.S., which is now in theaters. We got to go see it this weekend, me and my brother Carson. Again, that reaction is on the channel now. You can check that out. But this is an interesting kind of premise that I like a lot. Actually, the premise is it's all set in modern day, and there's astronauts that are up on the International Space Station, hence the title. And actually, we follow. The movie kind of opens with 2 American astronauts going to the station. So that's kind of how we open the movie, and then they arrive there, and they're greeted by a fellow American and 3 Russian cosmonauts who are there as well. So we've got the Americans and the Russians, 3 on each side. And then while they're there, war breaks out down on planet Earth. And so the teams are each respectively sent messages from their governments telling them to take over the International Space Station. So it kind of creates this really interesting conflict, kind of a microcosm, I guess you could say, of what's happening on Earth, which we never actually go to Earth and see anything there. It's all from
Oh,
this perspective of space and then on this space station. So it has a lot of that kind of claustrophobic feel, which is good for any kind of
Hmm.
tight thriller, and a great kind of central kind of concept. So going in, I didn't have huge expectations because I hadn't read any reviews. I didn't really know what people were saying about it. So I didn't really go in with high or low expectations necessarily, just kind of intrigued by the trailer, and came out of it enjoying it, but not thinking that they fully met their potential. So it's one of those movies that definitely has a great idea, but the execution isn't fully there throughout the
Yeah.
whole runtime, So the acting is great. I thought all of the actors did a great job. Ariana DeBose leads the cast. She's kind of the main character we're with the whole time. And then Chris Messina is a guy that I really like that plays
Oh, I like
another.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, he plays a big role in the film and does a great job. So, and then on the Russian side, those actors all did a good job as well. So, and then the other American is played by John Gallagher Jr., who we know from 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Okay.
He's
Yeah.
the guy with the beard in there. He does a great job as well. So good job on the performance side. It's the way it's shot is definitely shot for realism, so
Hmm.
it's basically all fluorescent lighting like you would have on the space
Yeah.
station. So it's not very dynamic in its visual style necessarily, as
Yeah.
much as I would prefer. But again, if I get that they're going for realism, so that's kind of what
Yeah.
they decided to go with. It just never really grabbed me, I guess you could say. It wasn't one of those thrillers where I was really on the edge of my seat the whole time.
Hmm.
There's a couple of great, exciting moments throughout the movie, but overall, I just wasn't really thrilled by it, I guess you could say. So overall, it ended up at 2.5 stars. I still would
Okay.
recommend it, especially if you're into these types of movies. You'll probably get something out of it. I just didn't think it quite hit the level as some of these other movies that we're going to discuss today. So yeah, that's where I was at. 2.5 stars. Again, if you're into that type of movie, you'll probably enjoy it. So I would recommend it. If not, maybe wait for streaming or wait to rent it and check it out then. So those are my thoughts. Bert, have you seen the trailer for this? Are you interested in it at all?
Oh yeah, it's right up my
Yeah.
alley.
Yeah,
It's very,
sure.
very. I mean, a lot of these films have some overlapping elements that we'll talk
Right.
about today, and this one appeared to kind of go right along with a lot of some of the similar things we've seen. Definitely one I want to see. Yeah,
Cool.
despite not a great rating, I'll probably like it at least as much, I would guess.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I think you may like it even more than I do. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on it when you do end up seeing it. All right, folks. Well, that's it for the ISS review. Let's jump into our top five space movies of all time. All right, folks. Well, now it is time to discuss these space films, some of our favorites. Going about making a list like this is difficult. I don't think we've ever done our favorite sci-fi movies because that's
I
such a
don't think so.
broad
Yeah,
topic. Doing space movies is a little less broad, but it's still a pretty broad topic. So we
yeah,
discussed beforehand, not including any like fantasy movies where it's like, Star
right.
Wars, for example, where it's just all set in a totally other universe that has nothing to do with
Yeah,
us.
right.
These space movies are more about astronauts, so people from Earth going into space and exploring
Hmm.
space in one way or another. I personally ended up having to put another kind of element onto this, which was no aliens. So
Hmm.
obviously, a lot of space
Gotcha.
movies deal with aliens visiting other planets and other
Yeah.
species and things like that. So in order to just, because I had such a hard time creating a top five, I was like, okay, if I get rid of alien movies, that's going to really help me. So ultimately, that's what I ended up doing. So none of my films feature aliens, either my honorable mentions or in my top five. So that's just something I had to do in order to ultimately, get to a list before, we had to record this. So that's what I ended up doing. Bert, what was kind of your philosophy going into creating this top five?
It's funny. I think I inadvertently did the same thing because I didn't
Oh,
include, for instance, Aliens or
right.
Pitch Black or something
Mm,
like that.
sure.
So yeah, kind of the same thing. The funny thing is with these space movies, but even with this focus that we have, I think this might be out of all of our podcasts the one that had the most 4.5 and 5 star films vying for that top five.
Oh yeah.
I can't think of one that had this many because it's just, yeah, it's just one of my favorite genres. So I just thought I'd mention that. I also wanted to just say something interesting. I mean, I did use the same criteria basically as you did,
Okay.
but I wanted to just throw out there that one thing that occurred to me while I mean, recently we did underwater films
Hmm.
and now we're doing space films, and there's really quite a correlation between those.
It's true.
And often it's a crew gets sent to explore a ship that has, stopped responding or has suddenly shown up.
Right.
Sphere is an example of an underwater film that does it. But I mean,
Okay.
you take Sphere and move it out into space, and then it's a bunch of films that we'll probably talk about today.
Right.
So it's yeah, it's kind of you almost wonder if it's studio at some point. Probably not, but if they were like, well, should we set it underwater? Maybe in space? What do you think?
Right, right. That's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, my shirt here, I'm wearing a Star Trek shirt. And
Oh,
Star Trek
nice.
is
Yeah.
talked about a lot as it's basically like an old school submarine movie, but it's really in space,
Right.
So it's
Exactly.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting correlation. But yeah, that was
Right.
kind of all the thoughts I had on it.
Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, well, it's time to jump into our honorable mentions. So let's do that now. All right, folks. So it is time for our honorable mentions. So first of all, I'm doing these in chronological order as I usually do, going with an old movie. This one was so hard to cut from my top five because I always love including classic films,
Yeah.
that a lot of people haven't seen or haven't heard of. I ultimately my top five ended up being more just ones that I personally really connect with and like. So this one didn't quite make it, but it was very close. It was in the top five for a long time. It's Forbidden Planet. So Forbidden Planet is from the 1950s. So this is going way back. Although it is all in Technicolor. It looks really nice. It actually the use of color is really really great in it. But this is one of those movies that's very influential, inspirational. This is before Star Wars or Star Trek. It has a very heavy kind of Star Trek vibe to it, in that it's about a crew of a spaceship flying around, and it's funny because it's a flying saucer. You open the movie with a flying saucer, you think, oh, here comes the aliens, and then it lands and humans come out. So it's kind of an interesting kind of take on that. But it's this crew that lands on this planet, and they're kind of investigating what's going on this planet. So has that kind of very Star Trek vibe to it. It's really just well shot, well edited, groundbreaking special effects for the time. Robbie the Robot is one of the most popular robots in movie history. He showed up in other movies later, TV shows and things like that. Stars Leslie Nielsen, who of course we know as
Oh,
like the Naked Gun guy, in a
yep.
very kind of serious role when he was much younger. It was funny seeing him with dark hair. So yeah, it's pretty neat just to see that too. If you're a fan of his, kind of see where he came from. So yeah, just a really solid, well-made movie from that era. Definitely, you can see its influence throughout other films.
Nice.
Um, then we have jumping to the 60s, an interesting one, Robinson Crusoe on Mars.
Oh,
So this is almost like another film I'm about to talk about, starring Matt Damon, The Martian. It's basically the 60s version of The Martian.
interesting.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah, it leans a little more sci-fi, a little kind of sillier and more out there. Obviously, we knew a lot less about Mars at that time in the 1960s.
Yeah.
So they do a really good job, though, of kind of telling this interesting survival story on this other planet. Where it's shot, I'm guessing they shot it all out in the desert somewhere. Although a lot of
Yeah.
it is on sets as well. So it's a good mix, a good blend of practical effects and interesting other types of special effects. Adam West makes an appearance here, who people
Oh,
know as Batman on television from that era. Before he got the role of Batman, he was in this movie. Byron Haskin directed this, who also directed the original version of War of the Worlds. So a
oh,
great director, great special effects here. It's really well shot and edited. Some kind of kooky things happen in it, but I think it's a lot of fun. It's fun too because it's the human, and he's got this ape friend, this little monkey with him the whole time, who he can kind of talk to, so it's not just a silent film the whole movie. And it makes it pretty interesting and pretty different from other types of space movies. So Criterion put out this edition, and it's really nice. So had to
hmm.
mention that. And then one more from the 60s, hailed as one of the greatest films ever made, 2001: A Space Odyssey, from Stanley Kubrick, visionary director. Told this epic story. It's 2.5 hour sci-fi film, very contemplative. Classical music paired with these really interesting images and groundbreaking special effects again. That's something that'll be, I'm sure, mentioned a lot on this podcast because if you're doing space, you're obviously not going to go to space to shoot it. So you have to, do it through special effects. And they just did a fantastic job with that here. Again, really groundbreaking stuff in this one. So this is one that's grown on me. First time watching it, I really didn't get it. I was like, what is this? Why is this hailed as a great movie? On rewatches, I'm slowly starting to get it. I think every time I watch it, I'm like, okay, maybe that means this. It's really just weird imagery here and bizarre stuff
Yeah.
happens, but it's definitely a classic for a reason. So had to mention that one. Before I move on, Bert, why don't you give us a few of your honorable mentions?
Okay. Well, the first one I have is Solaris,
Oh, with George
starring
Clooney?
Natasha McElhone, and then yeah,
Yes,
Clooney
I
too.
really like
Yeah.
that movie. That's on my list too.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and like I said, another one where like a crew is sent to a ship that has stopped responding. So it's one of these. And that never goes well, by the way. It's never
No.
like they get there and everybody's happy and like, oh, you didn't get our message? What happened? Join the party. It never happens that way.
Exactly.
And given this familiar setup, I mean, you look for a film to kind of distinguish itself from other ones, and I think that this film does that pretty well. Once you kind of have figure out what's sort of going on to Clooney as he arrives on um, the craft by Solaris there. It gets a little creepy, and that's kind of the tone for the rest of the film. But I didn't put it really high on my list because I don't feel like it leans in enough to that creepiness. I felt like if that's what they're going for, I kind of expected it to be a little more jarring, and there's some good visuals and score. And so anyway, that one's I got it at 3 stars. First time I'd ever seen it. I watched it
Oh,
this last
cool.
week. So
Great. And there's an original version made back in the 70s. It's a very different
mm.
type of, it's a lot longer. I think it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes or something.
Oh wow.
And so it's expanded upon a lot. But I actually, that's one where I do prefer the remake slightly to the original.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then next up, speaking of a monkey as a companion, I've got Lost in Space from
Oh,
1998.
yeah, that's on my list as well. Yeah,
Is
got
it
it right
really?
here.
Okay. I
Yeah.
was a lot of people hate this film.
I know. I know. I know. I don't,
I could tell you, I was blown away in the theater. I thought it was so much fun. Gary
yeah.
Oldman is
Oh,
tremendous,
yeah.
as
Excellent.
always. So
Hmm.
that helps a lot.
Yep.
He's doing Gary Oldman things in this film.
Right.
And so some of the CGI maybe isn't the greatest with that monkey and stuff, but
Right.
I really thoroughly enjoy it. I thought it was a really good tribute to the original show.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so
it's funny. I
yeah,
listened to the commentary this week, and they talked a lot about how they wanted it to be, pay homage to the original show, but be something fresh and different and modern.
yeah,
And I think they pulled it off. I really do.
yeah.
Although it was interesting because they were very honest too about what doesn't work. Because I don't think it's a perfect movie. I probably have it at like 3.5 stars, something like that.
Okay, okay.
And the director and the writer both were like, "Yeah, we tried to work on this. It didn't really work." And
Mm,
like you mentioned, the CGI wasn't quite there, at the time and stuff like that. So it was kind of a refreshingly honest podcast. They weren't just glowing about the movie the
I
whole
love it.
time. They kind of like
Yeah,
picked it apart a little bit, which was
love it.
kind of cool. But yeah, it's a movie that I've enjoyed several times. I think it's
Yeah,
really, really fun.
yeah. Excellent. The next one I got is actually a comedy
Mm.
called Galaxy Quest.
Oh, yes.
And there aren't actually a lot of space comedies. I think this is the only one. I mean, Spaceballs is
Sure.
a space. It doesn't really fall into our criteria, and
Right.
that may come up in our podcast in a few weeks here when we do spoof films.
Yes, definitely.
May or may not come up. And this film was so much fun. I saw this one in the theater too, and just I didn't know who Sam Rockwell was, but this dude is
Oh,
like 10th person on the list of probably in the cast, but he's
right.
just stealing scenes already.
Yes. Yes.
So funny. And same with Justin Long, actually.
Oh,
So
yeah.
funny. I
Yep.
didn't know who he was either, and just yeah, stealing scenes.
Yeah.
Great stuff. And Tony Shalhoub and of course
Uh-huh.
Tim Allen and Sigourney. But I mean, I've
Sure.
got this one at least 4 stars. It is so much fun and just kind of sends up a lot of the the films that we're talking about.
Yes, it does that very well. Yeah, that is a great one. Yeah, I didn't include any comedies on my list, but that is definitely one that I've rewatched many times
Yeah.
because it is a great Star Trek spoof. I mean,
Yeah.
it just does
Yeah.
such a good job.
It kind of unwittingly becomes an astronaut, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
And the last one I'll mention at the moment here is Ad Astra, and
Oh,
really like this one. It's just a great. It's kind of like Interstellar, just a little, a lot more introspective,
Yeah.
much more of a drama than like an action film. Although there are some really fun action sequences, like the chase on the moon, which is
Yes.
very unique, and I like that a lot. So there's some really good stuff here. Very well done. Looks great in 4K. So I had to
Yeah.
include Ad Astra as well.
Excellent. All right, so we'll move on back to mine. Going back again to the 70s, 1979, Disney made this movie. It's called The Black Hole.
Mm,
Um, this is a really fun, very much kind of trying to remake Star Wars a little bit, kind of trying to
okay.
chase that success. This was just a couple years after Star Wars came out in
Oh,
77. So,
okay.
they were like, "Where's our sci-fi thing? We got to do a big sci-fi movie." So they
Yeah.
created this, and it's a lot like Star Wars in that it's pretty much good for the whole family. It is a little darker though. Certain moments get pretty intense here. I think it was the first PG Disney movie, if I remember right.
Oh,
It's
scandalous.
yeah, right. It wasn't G, yeah. So but they do a good job with it. I really enjoy it. There's some cool designs for some robots and for some ships that I really like. Good cast, and pretty good special effects as well. So that's a one that's definitely worth checking out. It is on Disney Plus. If you have Disney Plus, you can watch it there now. And then, as I mentioned before, The Martian, one of our favorites. My wife really likes this movie. We watch it quite often, and this is just a really well done sci-fi kind of survival film, which Matt Damon deserved the Oscar for. I think. I mean, it's I think maybe one of his best performances ever. So very good. And then last one I'll mention here is Passengers, which Passengers is one that I quite like. I definitely like the concept. It's another one of those that I don't know if the execution is fully there all the way through, but I do enjoy it. I've enjoyed it a couple of times. Chris Pratt, Jennifer Lawrence, I think are both great in this. They're basically the only two actors in it, and they do a really good job with the acting. But definitely some an interesting concept again that I really enjoy and thought was quite compelling. So that was the last honorable mention I had. So Bert, why don't you go ahead and give us the rest of yours?
Okay, I've got Gravity, another
Oh,
Clooney film,
great.
which I mean, I mean, it's more Sandra Bullock's thing, but and actually
Right.
Clooney's in like he obviously likes to do those kind of films because he's
Yeah, yeah,
in a
right.
few of them, uh,
Yeah.
and just it's just a great small cast thriller. I didn't put it in my top five because I tend to, not always, but I do tend to favor a little more of a bigger production if
Sure.
I'm going to give the award to something. But for what it is, I really enjoy
Yeah.
Gravity. I mean, it's at least 4 stars for me.
Yeah.
And
Great.
then the next, I have three more, and boy, I really wanted to put these in my top five. Um, First one is Apollo 13, and just a
Mm,
tremendous and painstaking sort of retelling of that doomed Apollo mission, right?
yes.
And in fact, one of the few films, maybe ever, to have really filmed in zero gravity, at least for
Oh,
some of the scenes. Yeah, because
wow.
they
That's
went up in
right.
that rocket and then came down and
Yes.
did it over and over and over to have real zero gravity,
Yeah.
which is incredible. I mean,
It
Ron
is.
Howard, he's the lengths he went to for that, and it
Yeah.
shows too, and especially some of the scenes. Now, some of the scenes they are kind of just sort of miming, like moving with in
Right.
space. And
Right.
some of the behind the scenes, Bill Paxton talks about like the directors, Ron Howard's got us going like this, and he's like, this is going to look terrible on film. But no, but yeah, it's just a terrific film,
Yeah.
great score, everything about it. Really hard to leave that one out. I'm at 4.5 stars on that one.
Wow. Yeah. Great one.
Then there's a film I just watched and I was really blown away, and that's Sunshine
Oh,
from 2008, I think, or
seven. Yeah.
around there.
2007.
Seven. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And just wow, what an ambitious film.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sci-fi buy-in. Like there's, you got to you kind of
Sure.
get behind all that sci-fi, like getting that close to the sun and,
Yeah.
and that kind of
Sure.
stuff.
Right.
So if you're on board with that, I mean,
Yeah.
there's just so much good stuff here. Some very energized kind of physical performances by
Yep.
Chris Evans and Killian Murphy. Chris
Yes.
Evans, who way before Captain America,
Right. Right.
and just some really nice visuals and editing and camera angles. Yeah, several memorable scenes like the airlock and
Mm,
a good score.
yeah.
So yeah, wow, I was really blown away by that one. Have you seen Sunshine?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely. Many times. Yeah. Great
yeah.
one. Great film.
And then my last honorable mention is a Star Trek film. I'll do the original one from 2009. I say original, I mean of the newer
Yeah,
group.
right, sure.
And there's actually several Star Trek films that I could put, somewhere in this list.
Right.
I put this one an honorable mention because I saved one of them for my top five. Little teaser
Well,
there, but I mean, it just I couldn't believe how much of a tribute they did to the '60s series.
yeah.
I never thought we'd get that kind of film. I'm a mild fan of the '60s series. I mean, I've seen loads of the episodes,
Yeah.
so it was just I mean, what J.J. Abrams brought and the look of it and the casting just spot on. It's actually a 5-star film, and it's it's in my honorable mention.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that one up. That was in my top five until I decided, you know what, if
mm,
there's aliens, I'm gonna cut them out. And that was a hard
yeah,
decision. But
right,
like I'm wearing the Star Trek shirt. I'm a huge fan of the original series. I've owned the original series on Blu-ray. I've watched all the way through it a number of times
gotcha,
and
yeah.
got all the original films with the original cast. And then yeah, this new cast is what introduced me to Star Trek. I had never seen any of the older films or shows until
Oh,
2009. I went to the theater with my dad and watched that film and was just blown away. And that's what made me go back and rewatch everything. And so I'm a huge Trek fan,
that's really
specifically of
interesting.
the new.
So you
Yeah.
you had the flip side of experience. You saw these
Yep.
characters, and then you got to go back and see the OG
Yeah.
versions and see
Yeah.
how that worked backwards.
Right.
And you felt that was still translated very well. And
Yeah, definitely.
okay,
Definitely. Yeah, I
okay,
thought it worked really well. I mean, it's really incredible the performances by the new younger cast, how
yeah,
much they captured
hmm
what the original actors did, and but yet put their own spin on it. You know,
hmm yeah,
it's
yeah,
Spock, but he's a little different. You know,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it's cool how they did that. I thought they pulled it off really well. So yeah, it was a
yes.
unique way to experience that, but I really enjoyed it. All right, well that's it for honorable mentions. So now it is time for us to reveal our top five space films of all time. Here we go. All right, folks, this is it. Our top five space films. Bert, kick us off with your number five.
It is Armageddon,
Oh, okay, great.
the
Nice.
essence of entertainment. Such
Yes.
great fun and action,
Mhm.
loaded with humor,
Right.
and yet has a heart, I think,
Oh, yeah.
definitely.
Yep.
And the visuals mostly hold up.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit too much CGI in it, Um, and by the way, I was thinking, the asteroid coming toward Earth, and we go out there to blow it up. Is that the plan? Is that the real plan? Like, what if that is actually happening? I mean, what's the official word on that? Is that actually going down? Are we sending up nukes to do the American thing to it?
I think so. I think this is actually they uncovered government plans and they just put it on film. I think Michael Bay somehow discovered, oh, that's what we would do. Okay, I'm gonna make a movie about it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what we would do. That's kind of a
Yeah,
crazy thing to think about.
right.
Yeah, I mean, why not? You know, give it a
Well,
shot at least.
and of course here they actually land on the asteroid,
Yes.
and it's some of it's just silly fun, but
Right.
and Bruce Willis, he was like the ultimate action
Mhm.
hero during that time.
Yep.
And this is actually sort of heading into sort of the last few years of his sort of triumphant era of
Yeah.
action.
Sure.
Not that he didn't do several movies after that, but
Right.
and then Trevor Rabin's score is great.
Mm.
It's a really big premise, and I just feel like it delivers. It's, one of Michael Bay's, I mean, certainly is in his top five films, and just one of the best sort of popcorn munching action disaster films ever. I had so much fun in the theater watching this one.
Yeah, this is a great movie. Definitely one of Bay's best. It does everything Bay does well, you know, with the
Mhm.
visuals, memorable, just great cinematography, lighting, kind of
Mhm.
just iconic shots of, you know, the
Yeah,
characters and the action, and combined with a great script. I think that's
yeah,
my brother and I were talking about that this week. Like, what's Michael Bay's next movie going to be? I'm like, I don't know. I just hope it has a great script because whenever he has a great script, he's a great director because he just shoots the script. He's not really a big story guy. He's a visual
Mhm.
guy. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
whenever he can get that, like with this and The Rock is the other one of my favorites of his.
yes,
It can really
exactly.
he just really nails it. So
I
yeah,
agree with you. Yeah,
yeah,
sometimes the script in some of the like the Transformers movies just
yeah,
get kind of gets off the rails a little
it
bit.
does.
And those, I have all of those, but you know what I'm
Right.
saying. Like,
Yeah.
it seems like both those movies actually have really great script. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. So yeah, great pick for your number five. All right. Moving on to my number five. It is a movie starring the aforementioned Sam Rockwell. It's Moon. Moon, man, I really like this movie. I've seen this so many times. I remember watching this right around the time it first came out, hearing the buzz about it. Like, it's a really interesting sci-fi movie with, Sam Rockwell is like the only actor in it, basically. I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of fascinating. So ended up watching it, and first watch, I was just blown away. Just really enjoyed
Really.
his performance. I think, I think he's one of the best actors working today, probably. I mean, he's up there with some of my favorites. Every time he appears on screen, I smile because I'm just like, oh, I'm excited to see what this guy does. It is a different role for him. He's known for a lot
Yeah.
more comedic kind
Hmm.
of performances, but this is a lot more introspective, type of performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's definitely some comedy in it as well, some really, really laugh out loud moments, but overall, it is a lot more intense and very personal. It's very much him on his own. A lot of the movie, I don't want to give away anything for those who haven't seen it because there is a kind of a twist in the
Hmm.
film, but definitely worth watching if you're a sci-fi fan. It's really well made. Duncan Jones directed this. He's the son of David Bowie.
Oh.
Yeah, he directed this. This is his first film he ever directed, and is kind of ambitious. So an indie film, it's kind of a small budget, but it looks great. I mean, it really does. The commentary I listened to this week was him and a lot of the special effects guys talking about how many miniatures they made actually for the film that you
Oh.
don't really
Okay.
realize are there because they're kind of combined with CG backgrounds and different things like that. So pretty fascinating how this movie was made. There really aren't a lot of digital effects in it, or if there are, they're just kind of to supplement the practical that's already there. So yeah, I really enjoyed this film. This performance, it's very, again, introspective and kind of quiet. It's not, a lot of action or anything. It's very character focused. So I really enjoy it. I've enjoyed it every time I've watched it, and definitely, had to make my top five. So it ended up at the number five spot.
I finally saw Moon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think my expectations were too high. I don't
Yeah.
really know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting it was going to be funnier. You
Oh,
mentioned some
okay.
laugh out loud parts. I didn't find myself laughing very much, and I
Hmm.
also just didn't really feel like it just grabbed me that much. I don't know
Okay.
why. Yeah, so I mean, I'd be willing to watch it again,
Hmm.
but yeah, I was disappointed. I guess
Gotcha.
it just wasn't what I was expecting.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
I think
Okay.
a little of Sam Rockwell can go a long way.
Okay. Okay.
but uh but you said you've seen it a few times, so I mean it's possible that sometimes when you watch movies for the first time and it's not what you expect,
Right.
a second viewing can help you sort of now that you know what kind of film it is, then you can
Right.
kind of focus on the performances and things like that.
Yes, exactly. And again, I said I didn't want to give away too much, so
Hmm.
slight spoiler warning, but it's basically two performances he's giving in
Yeah,
this movie,
yeah.
which to me was another thing that kind of grabbed me and was like, okay, so there's this guy, and they're pretty
Hmm.
different, too, which I thought was compelling and interesting.
Hmm.
So
True.
that's another major part of what made it, I think, really engage me is because it was kind of two Sam Rockwells in one
Yeah.
movie
Right.
playing off of each other, which I still really don't get how they shoot some of those scenes. It just
I know.
like because
I
they're
know.
interacting so much with each other.
I
I'm like,
know.
well, how is that happening? So I'm always just kind of amazed by that kind of stuff. But yeah.
True.
So, anyways, number five was Moon. Bert, what's your number four?
I got to put The Martian at
Ah,
number 4.
yes,
And yeah, I just love the ingenuity that this character uses. When
right.
his crew kind of leaves him, they think he's dead, and so then they're heading back home, and meanwhile, yeah, he's working the problem, right?
Yeah, right.
uh I've previously compared this because we talked about this a couple times, but
Hmm.
Castaway, Robert Redford and All Is Lost, so these singular performances, even Moon, I
Yeah.
do feel that Damon kind of one ups Rockwell, but
Mm,
I thought Sam Rockwell did a very good job. It wasn't,
yeah.
that I disliked his performance or thought it
Right.
was bad. But anyway, with The Martian, just great pacing given the running time, some
Mm,
great inspired shot setups and editing, and I love the look of this film. It just looks
yeah.
like candy,
Yeah.
and it also asks some tough sort of existential questions. So it's got a little bit of everything, and it's at least 4.5 stars for me.
Yeah, it's a great pick. Yeah, there are some interesting questions that are asked because it's like, what do we do to save one guy? You know, how many resources do we pour
Right.
into it? And the crew out there that, you know, finds out about it, and the discussions they have. Yeah, that's definitely got some interesting kind of philosophical stuff going on, which is good. Yeah, you can check out our Ridley Scott podcast, which we did just a few weeks back, and we talk more extensively about that one.
Yeah, and you mentioned what do you do to save one person, and that kind of reminded me too of in Sunshine. Just to bring that one back real quick, I was just I don't know if I've ever seen a movie where the crew of like a ship is so singularly focused on saving mankind that in a split second they will drop you if it means getting to the
Right,
goal. I
right,
mean, it just was
exactly.
bananas. Within a few
Yeah,
seconds, they're like, "Well, he's got to go because he's
yeah,
standing in the way of our goal."
right.
It was very creative and interesting. Yeah.
Very creative. Actually, that's perfect because the next film is Sunshine. That's my number four. I made my number four. So we can talk about it right now. Yeah, Sunshine is fantastic. I watched this movie twice back to back this week. I watched it, and as soon as it was over, I was like, I got to watch that again with the commentary because I want to know what's going on here, how they
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
this. It's so good. Great casting, like you're saying. Chris Evans, Cillian Murphy, Benedict
Hmm.
Wong, Michelle Yeoh. Rose Byrne, Hiroyuki Sanada. I mean, the whole cast is like A-list actors now. Back then they
Hmm.
weren't, but now they're
Yeah.
all, you know, I mean, I think a lot of them have Oscar nominations or wins at this point. So pretty incredible cast that they assembled back then. Lots of philosophical themes, spiritual themes. I
Mm.
mean, really, really cool stuff that they're dealing with. Looks great. The effects, the camera work, all of it is just so, so good. The way they build the tension over the course of the film, the way it ratchets up towards the end is really incredible. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was really blown away on this most recent rewatch. I had seen it before and liked it, but this rewatch I gave it 4.5 stars. I mean, I just
Yeah.
was
Me
really,
too.
really into it.
Yeah. Can't wait to see it again, actually.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, one more thing about Sunshine. It just you know, last week we mentioned when we were talking about the new film Lift, when we did the heist podcast, you know,
Hmm.
the new movies that are shot digitally, which most movies are, and most of them look fine. Some of them, you know, I don't really care for how they look. They're very kind of sterile and flat
Yeah.
looking.
Yeah.
Sunshine does not look like that at all. It was all shot on 35 millimeter, and the director made a point to discuss that on the commentary. How his DP, you know, chose that specifically. He wanted to do the anamorphic, you know, widescreen format, and it adds so much. There's so much, you know, depth and clarity to it, and the use of lighting here is incredible. You know what they're doing with the sun itself and how it,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
plays into the spaceships and you know the human beings that are interacting with all that. Just some really striking imagery that I think you know is quite incredible. So seamless blend of practical and digital effects as well. I really never felt like oh that didn't look right or anything like that. I'm just in the story the whole time, and you know the cast just do a great job playing off of each other, and you know building these kind of interesting relationships between one another, and as we mentioned before, the kind of moral conundrums they find themselves in, and you know, Chris Evans doing some very un-Captain America things. He's like, there's literally a scene where he's talking about like it reflects the scene in Infinity War when he's like, we don't trade lives. He's like, yeah, we need to just kill that guy. You know, so
Yeah.
it kind of shows what a great actor he is, and just kind of
Yeah.
you know very interesting setup there. So yeah, and again, the way the film unfolds and where we get to at the end is
Mm.
so different from where we are at the beginning. And so it definitely has the thrills. It has, you know, the great script with all these interesting kind of ideas in it, and acting and direction. Danny Boyle directed this, who did several films I like, 28 Days Later, also with Cillian Murphy, and Slumdog Millionaire. He's done several very, very good films that I really like. And so, yeah, he definitely knocked it out of the park here. And his writing partner, Alex Garland, who has gone on to now have his own directing career. He did Ex Machina, he did
Oh.
Annihilation, a
Mm.
couple other really good sci-fi movies. He's a really thoughtful filmmaker in his own right. So had to mention him as well. Very curious to see Civil War, which is his next film that comes out later this year, which is going to be kind of fascinating. So yeah, all in all, just a great movie. Again, 4.5 stars. One of my favorites. Was glad to watch it twice this week and get a lot out of it both times.
Yeah, and I would bet it's not a huge budget that was available for
Yeah.
this film, and they seem to make the absolute most of it, right?
Right. Yeah, I want to say it was really low. It was like 40 million or something really extremely low. That was kind of crazy when I looked that up. I can't remember the exact number, but yeah,
Yeah,
definitely a much lower budget than most sci-fi movies nowadays. All right, Bert, we are on to your number three. What you got there?
and that's where I've got Passengers.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar film to Gravity in some ways.
Mm,
This is also a small cast.
right.
Mostly takes place in sort of these really, yeah, small enclosed spaces. Although that ship itself actually feels pretty big,
Right.
as in
Yeah.
comparison, and I really feel like they put you on this ship, and I just think it's a really intriguing place to be.
Hmm.
Obviously, this is more of a futuristic thing,
Sure.
um, clearly, but it's really the plot choices that pull me to this film and sort of the quandaries that at least one of the characters ends up in, and it's more of a romance film, sort of
Mm,
disguised as a sci-fi film,
right.
but I just really like the choices the characters have to make, especially with the way it ends. I love the ending that it has. Obviously, yeah, Chris Pratt and J Law have great chemistry,
Yep.
and I think other than maybe my number one choice here, this really is maybe the best looking film. I just think it's
Mm.
just got a great look to it. I'm either at four and a half or 5 stars on this one.
Excellent. Great. Yeah, it's definitely one I like a lot. Like I said, I got it and I've watched it a couple of times. I don't know if it ever fully comes together for me. I do like the ending. I think it's more maybe the pacing or something that just feels a little off to me for some reason.
Hmm.
I want to watch it again. It's been a while since I've watched it, but yeah, it does look great. It really does. I believe it was all shot in 4K and it does definitely has a unique look to it. The ship is unique, and I like, that it's obviously this huge ship that's carrying all these people, and that's why it's so big, and that's what makes it feel so much more almost kind of like oppressive because there's only one guy walking around the ship for most of the movie. So yeah, it's interesting. And like I said before, both the lead actors are great.
Yeah,
Yeah, definitely one I've seen, and maybe I'll watch it again this week. I think it's a good one.
yeah.
At number three, we have one that you mentioned in your honorable mentions. It's Ad Astra.
Oh, okay.
This one
Wow.
I just got to watch again last night.
Hmm.
Like you mentioned on 4K, it just looks stunning. This is one of those movies that the cinematography does a lot of the heavy lifting here because it's very, like you're
Yeah.
saying, introspective. Not a ton of dialogue. There's narration, which to me rarely works in a movie. Here, Brad Pitt really pulls it off though because
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
with him the whole time and we're really in his head and his
Right.
shoes the entire film. So that works really well. And it's again going back to the cinematography, the color. There's some really striking uses of color here that I think are really interesting
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
well done. The sequence on the moon, like you mentioned before, that action sequence is really exciting and interesting and different from anything I've seen before.
And there's no
Uh,
sound, and I like when
yeah,
if they're going for authenticity, I like when there's not the explosions and that kind of thing.
sure.
Well, I mean, they're there, you just can't hear anything because there's no
Right.
atmosphere on the moon.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, all that's really well done. It's a very smart movie, very well written, well directed. James Gray directed this, who's a younger filmmaker that I'm curious to see what he does next. But yeah, Brad Pitt, I put this definitely up there with some of his best performances. Again, we're with him the whole way through, so he really has to carry the entire film, and he just does a great job with that. And like you mentioned before, very introspective. About a relationship between a father and a son.
Yeah.
Tommy Lee Jones does great with his limited screen time.
Hmm.
Very, very interesting character he's playing. So, yeah, definitely one I've seen a couple of times and always have enjoyed and really enjoy it more and more almost every time I see it. So yeah, that made the number three spot because it's just one that's quite effective in its storytelling and the structure of the whole thing and kind of emotionally affecting as well. I find it to be. So yeah, that ended up at number three. All right, Bert, we're on to your number two. What do you got at two?
Star Trek Into Darkness.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. A
And I
bit of
guess
a
this does have
controversial pick.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll explain. And it does have
Okay.
aliens, so I guess I did go there a little bit at least.
Sure, sure, sure.
So obviously that and the other Star Trek movie, but yeah, I just to me this is probably my favorite of all the Star Trek movies, and it really comes down to this. I just really love the characters that were introduced in the Star Trek from 2009,
Yep.
and I really feel like they kind of hit their stride more in this film.
Mm,
And then on top of that, you have this extremely impactful villain played by Benedict Cumberbatch.
yeah.
And um, man, I thought his performance was just so overwhelmingly good, just way better than it should have been. I had never seen him in a film before, I don't think, at
Oh,
that
okay.
time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was just so impressive. And then on top of that, there's some great action. You get to see sort of the Starfleet command on Earth in ways that we really never have before, with like this little city, sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
almost
Right.
on
Yep.
Earth, and then this just crazy action scene with the ship coming down, and
Yeah.
yeah, so you get some stuff on Earth. A lot of these movies, you don't get a lot of time on Earth
Mm,
at all
true.
with the characters, so that kind of grounds it a little bit, I think. And there's some heartfelt moments for sure,
Mm.
like those earlier scenes with the original captain. I can't remember his name right now.
Oh, yeah. Pike. Yeah.
Pike, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and so yeah, for those reasons, I mean, to me, this is really about as good as it gets for Star Trek on film. I can make arguments for the other, a few of the other films as well, some of the older ones. But anyway, yeah, it's another 5-star Trek film for me.
Yeah. Great pick. Yeah. I said controversial because, notoriously, this is a remake, a loose remake, I guess you could say, of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
hailed as the best Trek movie by many Star Trek fans. And I'm a huge fan of that film. The original cast all do a great job in that one. I think, Into Darkness, I like a lot. I like the visual style. I actually like the script a lot and what
mm,
the kind of story is in Into
yeah,
Darkness a
yeah,
lot. I think I would have preferred that they veered away from the Wrath of Khan
hmm.
stuff, which is, it's a new timeline. So it's like, oh, we can kind of do that stuff, but we can do it our own way. I
He
think I
doesn't
would have
really need to
rather
be
than
Khan for first of all.
exactly. I would have rather
Yeah,
if
yeah,
it wasn't Khan, I think this movie would be a lot better. I think if they had
gotcha.
veered away from trying to recreate moments
Hmm.
from that classic film that so many people hail as the best Star Trek movie, I think it would have
Yeah,
worked a lot better for a lot more people,
right.
myself included. Because while the new cast is so good, and they handle it as best they can, you're
Hmm.
always kind of thinking in the back of your mind, oh yeah, they already did that and it was done really well. So why are they trying to do it again? Again, they're turning some things on their head a little bit and trying to make it their own. I just don't think they fully pulled it off for
Gotcha.
me. But again, still a compelling film, great action sequences, great effects, another great score by Michael Giacchino. Like you're saying, Cumberbatch he's great in the movie. I just kind of wish he wasn't playing Khan because
Gotcha.
the
Yeah.
way Ricardo Montalban played that was great and it was so different from what
Hmm.
he did that you can't really compare them, but you kind of do in your head anyway
Hmm.
because it's the
Hmm.
same character. So I don't know. For me, it's a little bit more of a mixed bag, I guess, even though I
Yeah.
would say I'm more positive on it than most other Star Trek fans are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely an ambitious film because to take on any kind of classic, the 2009 one's my favorite because it takes that and totally makes it its own. It's
Yeah.
totally its own story. Nero, played by Eric Bana, as a totally original character,
Yeah.
and I liked that. I thought that was a great,
Mm.
great way to go forward with it. Whereas Into Darkness was trying to take elements from the other stuff that didn't fully pan out for me. So, but still one that I own and I've watched a number of times. I think this is my wife's favorite as well of all
Oh,
the Trek movies. She greatly enjoys that one. She's a big Cumberbatch fan, and
yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's controversial, and I'm aware of that part of it. I can just
Mhm.
tell you that I saw Into Darkness before I saw the other con film, and so
Gotcha.
for people that are just locked in with that first one, they got to understand that when people watch the newer one and they're really sort of blown away by it, I mean, there's credence to that.
Sure.
So not to knock their opinion on it, and I get that. Some of it's just like in what order you watch things. That's why
Yes.
I'm always kind of fascinated with that. Like you were talking about it, like
Yeah.
you. And had you seen the Wrath of Khan first before Into Darkness?
I had. So when I watched the
Okay. Okay.
2009 film, which was my first Star Trek thing, I went back and
Mhm.
watched all the old stuff with the original
Ah,
cast, including all
okay.
the movies. So yeah, I'd seen Wrath of Khan, and then Into Darkness comes out, and I'm going, oh, what are they doing? You know, a little baffled
Yeah.
by some of the choices they made. But again,
Uh,
I kind of get what they were trying to do because again, that's
mhm.
hailed as such a great movie, a great character. Why not try to do our own version of it? Again, which, the success they had with the original, I guess they felt like, we can recast any character and it'll work out great. And, it didn't for everybody. So,
Well, and one of the tricky bits is you got characters that are recasted, Chris Pine instead of William Shatner, and he kind of resembles him, whereas this Khan is nothing like the other Khan, right? So it's like, well,
exactly.
is this just sort of recasting the same part or not? So I get it,
Right,
but I just
right.
know based on my enjoyment of it, it's
Sure.
so high up there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, great, great pick. Glad we could talk Trek. We need to do a whole Trek podcast
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I'd love to go back and talk about all the old movies and the next gen
Sure.
stuff and
Yeah.
these new
Yeah.
ones, which I've seen so many times. So yeah, maybe we can plan on that in the future. I know they're talking about making another one. They
Right.
just got a director attached for Star Trek 4, and I think they're talking about prequel as well. So
Mm.
could be interesting. So to keep watch out for that. All right, so now we're on to my number two. My number two space movie is another one you've already mentioned. It is Gravity.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. You have that pretty
Man,
high.
yeah,
Yeah.
Gravity. I gave this 5 stars on this recent rewatch
Wow.
because I really just feel like it's such an intentionally made film. You can tell like Alfonso Cuarón, who directed this, is such a great director. He's directed many great movies, but you can tell he just clearly had an idea in his head of what he wanted to do with this film and telling this very specific character story. Sandra Bullock, to me, this is her best performance she's ever given. I don't know if I've seen all of her movies, but I've seen a lot of them. And this to me is just kind of on another level. The way she's emoting throughout this film. I mean, it just feels so natural and real throughout the
Yeah.
whole
That's
runtime.
true.
She really just delivers every scene. I mean, we're basically just with her the whole time. Like you said,
Hmm.
Clooney's in and out of the movie a little bit, and he does a great job in it as well. Brings a lot of levity to the film, but
Yeah.
she's just giving such a compelling performance all the way through. There's really striking imagery here as well, some very memorable moments of her in space.
Hmm.
Basically, the whole thing's in zero G, which is
Yeah.
another thing that's wow, what a difficult task to pull off an entire film in zero G, not just a sequence or even half of the movie, but the entire film that
I
way.
know. Yeah.
Um, when I was rewatching this, I was just again blown away by the visual effects. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure it won Best Visual Effects that year that came out.
Mm.
But yeah, this whole film was shot on a soundstage. I mean, it's crazy to think about
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they're all on green screens here because it just feels so realistic. I mean, every
Uh-huh.
moment. It notoriously opens with a oneer, which I believe lasts like 6 to 8 minutes or something like that. It's all one long take, and so choreographing that had to be a huge challenge.
Yeah.
It has great score. It's used pretty minimally,
Yes.
but
Uh-huh.
it's
You're right.
really well done
Yes.
throughout the whole film. Very emotional, um, and it's well written. It's got just every element of the film, the editing, all of it just really comes together in a way that few films do. I feel like that really just drive home the point of that they're trying to get across of this woman who's kind of fighting for survival, who doesn't really want to, and it's really just compelling stuff when you get her backstory and that's
Yeah.
all unfolds naturally through the dialogue. It doesn't feel like forced exposition like a lot of movies can feel. So yeah, just top-notch filmmaking for me all the way around. Very intense, psychological. It's got some funny moments, some sad moments, dramatic moments. Just a powerful movie about moving on and letting go and living life. So yeah, it's one that I've watched a number of times, and every time I just feel like it gets almost better and better the more I watch it. So yeah, from 2013 on to now, I don't know that we've gotten a better um, space movie other than the one that I'm
Mm.
going to talk about next. So That's my
Great
number
film.
two. Bert, what do you have for your number one space film of all time?
Well, probably will come as no surprise that I've chosen Battlefield Earth as the number
Oh, of course, your
no.
favorite, one of your favorites. You've talked about this so many times. Do we have to hear about it again?
Right. No, just a little joke there. No, my number one would be Interstellar,
Yes.
and it has come up a time or two on the pod before. I've
Sure.
talked before about personal significance to me, and that's one of the reasons why I like this film, love this film so much.
Yeah.
Or I've talked about the score, how it's even better than the film.
Mm.
So just to comment on something new about it that maybe I haven't talked about before, I'll just talk about how deftly the events on Earth are tied to the events that are taking place in space,
Yeah.
and that despite the fact that the time is the events are taking place at a different time,
Mm.
and they're just the editing that takes place to pull that off and make the intensity in both places is just really fascinating, and like I said, just expertly done.
Yeah.
So I think it's just really top notch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is hard to
And
pull
yeah,
off. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it doesn't even necessarily make sense because if you sometimes when filmmakers will do that, you'll think if you overthink it, you're like, well, that's not taking place at the same time, but they
Right.
cut it together to just build this, more and more intensity.
Yeah.
So I mean that alone is one of the reasons why this is set apart, and and goodness that score. So I mean I can go on and on about this, but I have in the past. It's five-star film and my favorite film of all time.
Yeah, great pick, great pick. Definitely one that I've enjoyed a number of times as well. And yeah, you guys can check out a couple of podcasts, our Christopher Nolan podcast, where we talk about that film, and our top five movies of all time, which is how we started the whole podcast way back in the
Right.
day. So
Yeah.
yeah, you guys can check out all of that on the channel right now. Great pick. All right, folks, we've come to my number one space film of all time, one of my favorite movies of all time. And it's a very recent film, which is kind of rare for me. I'm more into kind of older movies, but this one just really blew me away. And every time I watch it, I enjoy it more. It's First Man.
I wondered. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
First Man from director Damien Chazelle, who's a very young filmmaker. He's only made, I think, four movies now. But what a talented guy he is. And then, of course, starring Ryan Gosling, one of my favorite actors. We talked about him last week on the podcast. This is just going to become a Gosling podcast from now on, I think. I'm Gaga for Gosling. It's the new name of the podcast. He's
Right.
just a great actor, super talented guy.
Yeah.
He really threw himself into this role. I was watching some behind the scenes stuff. He did extensive research on Neil Armstrong, who he's playing.
Mm.
I got to meet with Neil Armstrong's family members, his children, and really just did him justice. I think. I feel like it's difficult to pull off that type of role because you obviously want to respect the guy, for what
Yeah.
he did
Yeah.
and his life, and he's got living family members. You're playing a real person, but then you also want to make sure that you're not just playing a caricature. You want to make sure you're playing a real guy realistically, with flaws and things like that. So it's a difficult kind of tightrope to walk whenever you're playing a role that like that. And I think he really does it very, very well. This is a very relatable guy. He's a very analytical guy. He's very kind of straightforward, and does things kind of by the book, but also was a bit of a maverick in his own way as well, and definitely had troubles with his marriage and his children, but ultimately came through the other side. And this is one of those movies that it does everything so well from camera movement, a lot of handheld camera work here, which I get. I've heard complaints that kind of turns people off from the movie, but it's one of those movies that again they're trying to, a lot like Ad Astra, but maybe even more so, putting you in his shoes and that you're experiencing the movie through kind of his eyes in many ways. So there are several kind of POV shots and things like that. of him kind of, in these rockets and things like that as it's, kind of shaking and taking off and doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there's also some really great, they go to the IMAX format for several sequences that are really mind-blowing, particularly the sequence on the moon, which is really just incredible looking. And they did a great job with all of that. So that element of it, the visual element of it is stunning. The sound design here, I think, is next level. I think it's really incredible what they're doing, immersing you in the sound of, either the quietness of space and the moon, or, the incredible noise of these rockets and the things he's doing to, before he goes into space as he's kind of testing himself physically and all of that. It's just all really, really well done. Great use of score, as well as a little bit of soundtrack in there from the 60s, which is fun. And so this is a movie I've watched at least 4 or 5 times over the past, I guess it's been out for 3 or 4 years, or I guess five years now. And I've watched it several times, got the 4K, and I've just really, really enjoyed it every time I've seen it. And it's one of those movies that also it deals a lot with the astronaut side, the NASA side, but it really grounds it in the domestic storyline as well, with him and his wife, played by Claire Foy, who does a great job, and his children, and all of that again just feels very real. It feels almost documentary-like in some respects. We're kind of just in the living room watching scenes play out, or in the kitchen, or wherever. So all of that I enjoy a lot. The supporting cast, Jason Clarke, I think is really good here. Kieran Hines, Kyle Chandler is a guy I really like. They feel all very authentic to the era. Again, the 60s, kind of, thinking working man, that they all pull off exceedingly well. Difficult things he goes through. He loses his daughter early in the film, which was something that actually happened. And that's really what the movie's about. That's what it focuses on, is this kind of grief and how he's working through that. And it's just some very touching scenes, specifically on the moon, as he kind of lets go and kind of moves on with his life. The visual imagery there is just really impactful. So it's a movie that not only shows history very well and very accurately, I feel like, but also really just makes me want to be a better dad, a better husband, better man overall. It's one of those movies that really kind of hits you hard, a lot like Interstellar does in many ways as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like this is definitely one of the best uh, space films, best modern films that has been made recently. Another thing about the cinematography I mentioned is they do not only switch between the widescreen and IMAX, but there's some that are shot 133, so it's a
Oh yeah.
square
Yeah.
in the
Right.
middle of your TV, which is how movies would have been shot back then.
Hmm.
Many movies, especially home movies and things like that. So it's just again very every choice they made, I feel like, was very intentional in what they were trying to get across, and it just worked for me. It totally worked. So that's what ended
Nice.
up at number one.
Yeah, and I know you've talked about this one before, and I did finally get a chance to watch it.
Oh, great.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll tell you what I thought about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
It is kind of a neat perspective to kind of just see this from Armstrong's sort of point of view and that kind of thing.
Right. Hmm.
And I like the detail they take, the painstaking detail to recreate a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And you got the training, and then his setbacks and personal issues. I didn't know about most of that stuff, so that was pretty neat to find out.
Yeah.
Um, and Gosling's very good in this.
Hmm.
There's a marked sort of somber tone at times,
There is. Yeah.
and considering what's taking place, I guess I expected it to be more like celebratory,
Right.
probably
Sure.
because I've seen Apollo 13 a bunch of times,
Right.
and that one's much more about the American hero, and it's
Right.
I mean there's intense scenes in Apollo,
Sure.
but here it just got a little, like, even at the very end it was so melancholy that I just kind of thought, I mean, it reminded me a lot of Gosling's performance in Drive.
Right.
um
Yeah. Sure.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I don't know, it was an interesting choice. Maybe that's how um Armstrong really is or was.
Right.
I don't know, but so that was a little bit strange to me. But
Hmm.
I will say too, I liked the film. I need
Hmm.
to watch it again. I got interrupted like 3 or 4 times
Oh,
watching this
okay.
one, so I
Yeah.
did like it.
Okay.
But I think I need to get a good rewatch in there.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's definitely worth a rewatch. It is one of those movies that is more. like a lot of these that I picked, kind of unintentionally, very somber, kind of introspective,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
very character focused, and so those I feel like a lot of those types of movies are better on rewatch because yeah, going in, you can expect, oh, it's going to be a big space, kind of exploration, fun, kind of lighter tone. But yeah, this one's definitely deeper and
Hmm.
more, more intense in a different way than something like,
Yeah.
Sunshine or some of these others that we've mentioned, and that
Right.
they're a lot more personal
Yeah.
films.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they're definitely worth, revisiting a number of times so that you can kind of get your head in the right space and figure out what they're trying to communicate, which is pretty cool. All right, folks. Well, that is it for our favorite space movies of all time. That was a ton of fun. Yeah, a topic that again was difficult. There's so many great ones out there, and but I think our lists definitely reflect our tastes as they always do, and we'll give people a lot to check out if they haven't. Let us know your favorite space films in the comments below. We want to know which ones you like the best. Make sure you share this on social media with your friends. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can check those out at the link below. Bert, as always, it was a blast. Hope you had a good time.
Yeah. It was a blast off time.
Absolutely. We got to float back home now, but thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Real World Podcast. We will be back next week. Make sure you join us there. Check out all our videos on the channel right now. Like I said, I have that reaction to I.S.S. Coming right out of the theater. And so, yeah, next week, we're planning to have Josh back to the podcast. We're going to talk about some of our favorite Star Wars characters. So if you're a
Hmm.
Star Wars fan, you're listening to this, we didn't really mention any Star Wars, you're maybe a little disappointed. That's all right. We got you covered next week with a big Star Wars podcast. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so, yeah, be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much again. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. And we'll see you next time right here on The Real World.